probably the weakest in the series, but that's a surprisingly high bar. Alright, hi everyone, back again with the next one on my list. This one is Kung Fu Panda 4. Now, I'm actually a fan of the Kung Fu Panda series. It feels like it's been that little franchise that could for many, many years now. That has always been better than it has any right to for a franchise about Jack Black as a panda that can do kung fu and does a lot of butt jokes. But I think it's really kind of had this kind of cult following pretty much since the first one. And you can definitely see a lot of that now as the people who saw the first one when they were kids are growing up and now kind of repraising it. Like, hey, Tai Lung is actually a really good character. And so I'm glad to see that particular character back. I'm glad this franchise is back as a whole. It does feel like a step back in some ways. It definitely tries some new things, introduce some new characters, and does also feel like it cuts some corners in order to save money. Sorry, I got to email that caught my attention. Particularly with the lack of like the bigger names of the original trilogy, like Jackie Chan, Angelina Jolie, Seth Rogen, and Lucy Liu. Who played the Fearsome Four or whatever it was. So they are certainly not appearing in this picture for this entire thing. They show up like a cameo at the very end, but it's very, like, the actors aren't there. And they keep saying it's like, oh, because the story didn't fit, we didn't pack it with too many characters, and that could be true, but I feel like it's much more likely that this was to save money. And their absence is felt. It's not a deal breaker. It doesn't like kill the movie or anything like that, but it is a notable absence considering their role in the past 3 movies. That being said, this has always been a franchise that has always had a surprisingly good heart. It has always kept the main character of Po moving towards natural progression. Like the first one was about him finding his way as even accepting that he can be this kind of kung fu character. Then it was about him embracing it completely and recognizing his own abilities. Then the third one was about accepting his leadership role and that he can actually train and lead the next generation, just be a leader. And master himself that way. And this one is about passing the torch on to the next generation or the next hero, the next dragon warrior. So in that perspective role is Aquafina as the Fox character named Zen. Who has a history with the main villain of this piece. Oh, by the way, this franchise also has a weirdly great rogues gallery of characters from Tai Lung from the first game, from Gary Oldman's character in the second games, General something, I'm terrible with the names. And then, of course, what was the third one? Oh, J.K. Simmons as the third villain. All of them had surprisingly strong arcs. J.K. Simmons much more comedic role, but it was still entertaining. He was a good character. And this one has Viola Davis as the Chameleon, which is probably the most simplistic name to remember here, who has the ability to transform into any kind of creature she wants, and her goal is she wants to be able to possess the powers of Kung Fu Masters of old, so she can take on their abilities and use that to basically conquer the world. And it is Viola Davis, so she does carry a lot of gravitas. There's a lot of intensity into the role for a cartoon. I do think it's the weakest of these villains. I don't think it's Viola Davis' fault. I do think I don't want to say its production was rushed, because I don't think it was. But it does feel like it's trying to recapture magic that's been sitting dormant for a long time. Not that it doesn't recapture to some degrees. Like, Jack Black and Awkwafina have really good chemistry. Awkwafina is a very natural fit into this character and into this world. She flows into it very she makes it look easy, and her voice talent really lends itself to just this style of humor and animation and character work. So like, her character works really well, and I really like the way she's designed, and I really like the way she moves. All that works very, very well. And I like the idea for Jack Black's character, like Poe's progression in this, and how he has to accept that he can't be this way forever. He has to eventually transition into more of a spiritual leader role, where he can guide the next generation of people to take on his place. I think that's a good direction to take the character. I think it was a smart way to approach that. And Jack Black, of course, always kills it. Dustin Hoffman also returns as Sifu. And his scenes, although they're brief, he's not in the movie very much, are still entertaining. They do find a way to still keep working with him. I was disappointed he wasn't in the movie more. I do like his character. I think it would be good to continue to integrate him into the story. They didn't quite do that. It kind of makes room largely for Awkwafina, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it kind of goes back to the other characters I mentioned who are out in the movie. Like, their absence is felt. Taking their place is much more Bryan Cranston and James Hahn as Lee and Mr. Payne, respectively, pose two gay dads, so basically. I know they're not canonically gay, but they're definitely framing it as, like, the two gay dads who are worried about their son co-parenting. And so their dynamic is really funny. I really did like the way they play off it. I did like they brought Bryan Cranston back for this to explore more of his character, and he does have a good interactions with Mr. Payne. Their dynamic is a lot of fun. It's very quirky. The action scenes are still very well done. They're very creative, as they always have been. Very flourishy, very flashy. The climactic scene in particular is like, okay, there's a lot of creative stuff you can do here. That's pretty cool to see. They brought Ian McShane back as Tai Lung, and that's kind of one of my big complaints with the movie is I don't really do enough with him. Like, originally it's kind of pitched like, oh, it's the chameleon disguised himself as Tai Lung, so he's playing this part. But they do, spoiler alert, they do eventually bring him back. I don't think it's that much of a spoiler because you can kind of tell from the offset that's what it's setting up. And while I like what the resolution is for that particular story, it does kind of feel like a waste of Ian McShane. And they couldn't get anyone else come back. Like, Gary Oldman didn't come back. J.K. Simmons doesn't come back, even though both those characters make cameos. And you could tell, I know why Ian McShane came back, because Ian McShane is a businessman first and foremost. He's like, if there's an easy paycheck, he'll do it. Like, not that he doesn't have any dignity or self-respect or anything like that. It's more just like, yeah, I could see him coming into studio for a day, just to record some lines. I do think this was a missed opportunity to go into his character a bit more, but I also have to remember, like, the movie's not about him, and even though I feel like he was the least developed of the villains of the original trilogy, it was still nice to see him back regardless. And McShane does just have a way with words and tenses that I just very much appreciate. And also nice to see Ke Huy Quan as Han, who is a minor character in the film, but anytime he shows up in anything, I'm just like, good on you, dude. I'm so happy this guy has kind of made the revival that he's made, and he's on an upward trajectory. So I'm very, very happy. Every time I see him, it just makes me happy whenever he shows up on screen. But yeah, other than that, like, compared to a lot of the other Kung Fu Panda movies in this series, like, I do emphasize this is the weakest, and a lot of it is because it feels trimmed down. And some of that might have to do with the fact that there is an hour-and-a-half mandate. But that's never really been a problem for the series before. They've still managed to do a lot with the time they have. So I don't really want to say it's that. I feel like I mentioned before, it does feel like it's trying to recapture something, as opposed to building off something. Like, because when it does build off the previous movies, it works very well. Like Poe's arc of becoming a spiritual leader, his attempt. Like, I don't think it's a spoiler to say he's passing the torch off to Awkwafina's character. I think that's pretty obvious from the get-go. And the progression, their relationship is the heart of the movie, and their dynamic works well for the most part. But it's really when it's like it feels like it's trying to capture the same villain vibes previous movies. It doesn't quite get there. The writing's not really as strong in that regard as previously. I don't know if the same writing team or the same directing team came back for this one that worked on the original trilogy, but it does kind of feel like Community Season 4 in a way, which I still stand is not the worst thing ever, but it does feel like it's trying to recapture the magic of somebody else's work. And while it does an admirable job of capturing that, it just doesn't quite get all the way. Now, would I like to see them do more of these and see if they can do it again? Yeah, absolutely. I would like to get the other characters back. I want to see how Awkwafina can interact with the other members of the Fearsome 4 or 5, whatever. I really shouldn't know what they're named. But either way, I'm gonna look at this. Yeah, so it's a different directorial team. So that might play a bit into it. Granted, I don't know if these are all consistently directed by the same person or if they've had different directors in the past. I'm going to quickly try to find out. Bear with me. Okay, so it has kind of passed the buck to different directors with each film. That's interesting. So I'm learning something with you guys right now. Fu Panda 2. Who directed that one? That was directed by Jennifer Young Nelson, arguably the best one. Now, who directed the third one? I'm just curious now. Bear with me, guys. That was directed by another director. Oh, Jennifer Young Nelson did 2 out of 3 of them, or at least co-directed. Okay, so that explains a few things. That being said, yeah, Kung Fu Panda 4. It does an admirable job of what it wants to do. It doesn't quite capture the magic of the original trilogy, but that being said, this has always been a series that's been good in spite of itself in a lot of ways. But it's enjoyable romp. It's good for kids. I can imagine it has a good message at heart, and I like where it's going. And if they do want to make another one of these, I'd be very curious to see what they want to do. So, yeah, Kung Fu Panda 4, passable film. Enjoyed it. It's a good addition to the series, even though it doesn't quite meet its peak. So, that's all I got for that one. Thank you guys so much, and see you all in the next one. Bye.